Hey, welcome to the Restaurant Coach Podcast. It is the cure for the common restaurant. Today, I am so honored to have with me today from Chicago, Chef Rick Tramonto. Chef, it's such a great honor to have you on the show today. Thanks for agreeing to be on the show. I mean, I'm actually a little overwhelmed because I've been a huge fan of yours for a long time. So,
Oh, thank you. That's very kind of you. When I was watching your stuff, I was so inspired. Yeah, it's a great need right now to have these conversations and to have somebody to have them with. So hopefully we can bless somebody today with some wisdom or something.
awesome. And so people who, I mean, if there's a likely chance people don't know who Chef Rick Tramonto is, why don't you give a little bit of your background?
Oh, Wendy's old-fashioned hamburgers in 1977.
Nice.
That says it all, I mean, I was blessed enough to get hired by Dave Thomas himself in Rochester, New York. Actually,
Wow.
Dave had come out of Ohio, and they started opening up in upstate New York. And a gentleman named Dick Fox, who I think still to this day is the largest Wendy's franchisee. And I was a kid who left high school rather young. My dad went to prison when I was young, so I quit school. My mom was a cleaning lady and needed a job. So,
Right.
Started to hunt around, and I looked at a gas station. I looked at construction. I was still, 17, ish. And there was a new restaurant opening on Lake Avenue in Rochester, New York. Remember it like it was yesterday. That served square burgers. Square burgers, right? Went and knocked at the back door, and this gentleman answered, and his name was Dick Fox. And I said, "Look, I don't have a high school diploma. I don't have any experience. I'm looking for a job." I explained the situation. He invited me in, sat down, invited another guy over to sit down, and he says, "Hi, my name's Dave Thomas. I own the place." And he started telling me a little bit about his story. And I said, "Look, I'm just looking for, I'll work really hard for you. I'm just looking for an opportunity." And I was hired. I started the next day they used to patty their own meat back.
Oh, wow.
So when you opened the restaurant, you had fresh, 20-pound sacks of ground burger meat, and you'd put them in this hopper, and you'd patty out all the burgers. And I digress. Don't want to dwell on it too long, but it set the course is really why I want to make the point that it was somebody that gave you an opportunity. And that stuck with me my whole life, that always answer your emails and write thank you letters, but always give somebody an opportunity, and you don't know their backstory a lot of times. You have assumptions, and I think that's some of our biggest mistakes sometimes, is you don't assume. You kind of let somebody express themselves, explain themselves, and learn about them, and show some compassion, I guess. So
Definitely.
for a couple of years, and had an opportunity to go to a steakhouse called the Scotch and Sirloin, which is a famous upstate New York. I grew up in Rochester, New York, so Rochester, Buffalo, Syracuse was that triangle. And then had an opportunity to go to Manhattan. I mean, there wasn't a lot of choices at that point. So as soon as I turned 19, I said to my mom, "Look, I want to do this. I'm not really sure how to do this, so I'm not going to go back and get my diploma at the time. I certainly wasn't going to be able to go to culinary school." So, it was like apprenticeship was still alive and well, and going into somebody's kitchen, whether you were going to be an electrician or a plumber or a carpenter, a craftsman of any kind, you still had a journey. It was like journeymanship in a way, right? So, 81, went to Manhattan with a couple of friends of mine, and we got a 1-bedroom apartment in the West Village on West 10th and 6th Avenue, across from Texarkana and Balducci's at the time. I had a 6th-floor walk-up, so my bedroom used to look out onto this building that was actually the Joffrey Ballet.
Oh, wow.
So that was my entertainment. because I had no money. And I got hired at the Tavern on the Green, and Patrick Clark, if you,
Yep.
very famous, amazing guy. And Patrick is another one that just, no experience for me. He's telling Patrick, no experience, and my first real kitchen in my life. And he opened the door, and the tavern was a beast to enter into, to say the least. So about a year and a half there, and there was a guy who was coming to New York. His name was Alfred Portali from Buffalo, and opening up a place called the Gotham Bar and Grill. I gravitated there because of the upstate connection, and Alfred again. Third time's the charm, right? Welcomed me into the kitchen, did a stage, hired me, fell in love with it, and grinded there for 2 years. And then Alfred said, there's those were the doors that started to open. And Alfred started to set me up with stages within the city because Alfred was so, a lot of ways classically trained, worked with Michel Girard, graduated #1 in his class at CIA. Those were all foreign things to me at the time. And he said, let's get you into some French kitchens on your days off. So he got me into La Grenouille and La Reserve. And at the time, there was a new restaurant opening up called Aurora with Chef Pongo and Joe Baum. And I was friends now with a circle of cooks at the time. Like Michael LaMonaco was one of my best friends, and Bobby Flay and Gail Gand and Tom Colicchio and Tom Valente and all this group, 82, 83, 86, was an exciting time in New York. It's a very special time, and we were all grinding, and it was pretty awesome, and it was a pretty knit group. So I went and did the opening of Aurora with Chicago. That was like the first real hardcore French taste of life in those four walls. And that was a tough ride. So 10 years in New York, and then met my first wife, Gail Gand, who's a pastry chef, and she was in Chicago, and we ended up back in Chicago. Came here and did never left, but came here and did a wonderful stage and stint at Le Francais, and I didn't get the job with Jean Blanchet. So I was trying to figure out, what I was going to do. I had long hair and earrings at the time, and Jean Blanchet's kitchen was like pretty tough, which is a great story we'll get to later. And I ended up interviewing with Rich Melman from Let Us Entertain You, and getting a job at a restaurant called Avanzari as a sous chef, contemporary Northern Italian restaurant. And, worked there for a number of years. Did a lot of Italian work with a restaurant called Scusi and Avanzari. And, Rich kind of opened another door that was a very amazing foreign door in a lot of ways, because it was the business door.
Right.
Rich was my mentor for my whole life as far as being a restaurateur and a businessman and understanding the restaurant business, right? So I had an opportunity to do that, and there was, I like to kind of peel it back a little bit and say, going to Fork was, I gotcha.
Yeah, there you are.
Yeah. Going to Chicago was kind of like culinary college.
Yeah.
What was missing was grad school, and for me, grad school was going to Europe.
Oh, wow.
How was I going to get to Europe? How was I going to work with the chefs all the chefs that I worked with, right? How do you take one step back? And Rich made a few phone calls for me and introduced me to a guy named Bob Payton, who had an amazing company in London, England, and who had a country house hotel in Stapleford Park, side of England. And I got a gig going to England. He got me work papers and the whole 9 yards, and went to Europe for 4 years, and trucked it and traveled it and did France and Italy and Spain. And it goes to those doors. You got to open those doors when people knock.
Oh yeah.
You got to be willing to knock, right? So Bob introduced me to Raymond Blanc, and Raymond introduced us to the Roux brothers, and the Roux brothers introduced us to Pierre Gagnère, and Pierre Gagnère introduced us to Pablo Cus, and the rest is history.
Yeah.
You know, it all just kind of just unfolds, you know, and you work and you meet and you stage and you respect. And came back to Chicago and went back to work with Lettuce again for a little bit, and then had an opportunity to do a little tiny restaurant called Trio, little tiny 50-seat restaurant that, you know, got the attention of critics and food networks and publishers and all of that, and ended up marrying Gail, and we started that whole journey as far as writing books, and Gail got her show on the Food Network, and we opened up another restaurant called Brasserie Tea. And so all of these things, you know, happened over an 8-year period of time to kind of bridge the gap. Now we're kind of into the late 90s. We had a fire at Brasserie Tea. We lost our restaurant after 3.5 years, 4 years. And I remember Rich Melman used to live in our neighborhood where we had our restaurant, and kind of came and saw the burnt out wreckage of the restaurant, and, you know, helped us kind of navigate that disaster. And then during that time, it was kind of time to leave Trio. We had kind of won a Beard Award and wrote some books and wanted to kind of do some other things. And Rich offered us an opportunity to do what we did at Trio in downtown Chicago. So that's when we did True. And then 10 years, almost 11 years at True in the four walls, and 6 more books we wrote, you know, almost every year. We kind of did a book during that period of time, and we opened up some Italian restaurants called Osteria Via Stato, and had a chance to do a Tramonto steakhouse and an Osteria di Tramonto. 9/11 happened, 2008 happened, you know, disaster came crushing down on everybody at that point. And I just took a break, actually, after about a 25-year run. I just needed to catch my breath. I took about 2 years off and wrote an autobiography called Scars of a Chef. And then one morning I was sitting there watching the Today Show, watching Katrina unfold on the television. And I had a really good friend down in New Orleans, a chef named Chef John Folse. And I called John and said, "Hey man, how are you doing down there?" And, you know, for them, hurricanes are nothing, right? I mean, they're so resilient. Not that they're nothing, but they know how to fight pretty hard. And
it happened a lot there,
man, you know. And there was the first time, you know, knowing anybody that knows John, you know, he's such a positive, you know, glass half full kind of guy all the time. You know, he's just an incredible ambassador to Louisiana cuisine, but also to people. He's just such an amazing people.
He is.
Right?
I met him a few times. He's an amazing man.
And to hear John not say anything on the other end of the phone, you knew that it was bad.
Yeah.
And I said, "Hey man, what can I do to help you?" You know, and he's this long pause, and he's like, "Want you to come down here." I'm like, "What?" He's like, "I need you to get on a plane and come down here and help me cook for FEMA and the rescue workers. And we're going to set up in St. Bernard's Parish, and we have all these mobile kitchens." I'm like, "Okay." So next day I got on a plane. He had officers and military with him, met at the airport, brought us down into the disaster zone. And we cooked for 6 weeks for rescue workers that were going out pulling bodies out of houses and doing some pretty hardcore stuff. And they'd come back and they'd rest and they'd eat and they'd go back out again. I remember, after that period of time, he just kind of drove me to the airport and he said, life's never going to be the same. And I said, you are correct. Life's never going to be the same. I've never been in war. My family has not, I guess my grandfather had served in the military, but my dad didn't, and I went back to Chicago, and about 3-4 months later, he called and said, hey, we're going to rebuild the quarter. And the Royal Sonesta Hotel in the French Quarter would love for us to do something together. Are you interested? I flew back down, and it was pretty amazing. I mean, it was just like one of those God-sent things that we were meant to do this project and to help rebuild this whole area of New Orleans, 10 years, again, 10 years this year. It'll be 10 years in 2001, in July of 2001. Wrote 2 more books during that period. I like to write books during the, I like to be in the shit as you're writing. I think that's a good outlet for me to stay sane.
It is.
So here we are.
Awesome. That's amazing. Yeah. I'm a former U.S. Air Force pararescueman, and a lot of the pararescue guys went down and helped out at Katrina. So
yeah. It's interesting because about 3 years into New Orleans, I have a really good friend. His name's Charles Carroll, and he's the chef at River Oaks Country Club in Houston. And Charles would put a group of chefs together and bring them to Afghanistan to cook for the troops.
Wow.
Called Operation Hot.
That's a good name.
I got to go to Afghanistan 7 years ago with him, Rick Moonen and Charles Carroll and myself, and some Food Network folks and some celebrities, and we got to do like a USO show for 3 days. We all met in Washington. We all flew to Washington. We got on a plane. We flew into Beirut, and then we took a big, huge bomber, another 10 hours to Afghanistan, landed in the middle of the desert. And, you get out after, a 30-hour, 35-hour trip, and there's all these tents set up, and there's all this 5,000 troops in the desert. And we did a 2-day barbecue event for that, and then got back in a plane and scooted out, It was insane.
That's crazy. Well, let's get into some questions. COVID-19's really shaken the industry down to its core. What's your view of the industry right now as you see it?
Yeah. The view is changing. That's the view. I think that's the only word that comes to my mind is hurting and changing, and not only hurting financially, but I think that, people have kind of, in this business, in my 40th year in the restaurant industry. So when you spend a lifetime doing something and it kind of dissipates, or it's so disruptive that you can't recognize it. During 9/11, I think we saw what the fix was. During 2008, I think we saw what the fix was. I think this is a new strain of not sure what the fix is, and everybody uses fancy words like, well, we're going to pivot and we're going to reinvent but the core of it is hospitality.
Right.
The core of it is cooking for people. And we can still have hospitality and cook for people, and they can pick up curbside and to go and all of that. But I think this word reinventing goes a little deeper.
Yes.
I like to use the word, I think when people lose hope is when they lose their center. And I think we have to continue to inspire however that may be. And it could be just from a humane standpoint of giving somebody a hug or going and help them, with whatever they need at the time. But, looking at the industry, I think it just has to be continued hope, and we have to kind of stick together. And I think it's going to continue to change. Like there was a minute, literally in Chicago, and let me back up a second. I go to New Orleans probably every 6 weeks
Mm-hmm.
and stay there for a week and then come back to Chicago. And I have a consulting company now, and I do a lot of things all over the country. But what I have in New Orleans is a licensing management deal. So there's a team there, and we created the concept and the menus and the food and the recipes and all the systems, and I go in and out. I didn't even get a chance to really say goodbye to my staff. Like, I'm just trying to put it all into perspective for you that, I saw them at Christmas. I came back in January. I was supposed to come back in March. The virus hit and everything shut down. And, the Sonestas never really furloughed anybody during tragedy. They've always been the beacon of hope. They've always been ground zero for Katrina, for Rita, for all these things. And I've never seen, a hotel over 100 years never close over tragedy. This was the first time that 350 people were, furloughed, and the restaurant literally shut in 48 hours. And it was like, wow, I had to take my breath, and it was like, okay. And I was actually doing a large consulting project in Manhattan Beach, California for the band Kiss. They have a bunch of restaurants called Rock and Brews all over Southern California. And I had just come back from that. And my chef at the restaurant called and said, hey, we're shutting it down tomorrow. And I'm like, okay, it's going to be a couple of weeks, maybe a month, we'll figure it out. 2 weeks turned into 6 weeks, turned into 8 weeks, turned into 6 months, right? So, it definitely knocked the wind out of me, and, being able to kind of take a step back and, use the time wisely, as they say. But it's still trying to help the ones that maybe can't help themselves. There's dishwashers and line cooks and, people that live literally paycheck to paycheck. And, those were the ones that you wanted to kind of grab onto and help or give a hug or see what they needed or whatever. And it was too late. You know what I mean? I couldn't get back in that period of time. And we would do Zoom calls and phone calls and try to keep everybody together, but it was tough, and so during this period of time, I'm in Chicago.
Right.
And Chicago's now going through that same cycle. And then the riots happened, right. And Chicago just blew up. I mean, the unrest and the period of time when we thought like, okay, we're going to start the outdoor dining, and we're going to start all these things, all these pivots. It was just this horrific unrest in the city, which was pushing everybody out of the city and shutting everything down. And at the same time, New Orleans got from stage, 1 to 2 to 3, and they had some unrest, nothing like Chicago, but then they had the hurricane hit St. Charles, and then the hotels started to absorb folks and help with that, right? So, yeah, I know we're on just the first question, but it really is a day by day thing. Without having it be a cop out answer, because you're just really kind of looking to see what is around the corner. Let's focus on today and not worry about tomorrow at this point.
I think that's a good attitude to have. Is like, I think people can they can drown themselves in fear and doubt and uncertainty of tomorrow, where you have control over today. So what can you do today to manage it and just make it the best you can? So
100%. I agree with that 100%.
Yeah. And what are some ways you're recommending to your clients that they shift their business models right now?
It's different. I think it's all very different. I think the folks in California that I'm working with, they're going through the fires. I mean, if you've seen any of the fires that are going on,
horrific.
I've never seen anything like it. Like it's like the end times, I mean, between the virus and waiting for the locusts to show up. And
don't say that.
Right.
I'm telling you, if locusts show up tomorrow, I'm calling you back. And I'm like, what?
But again, I think that, everything is different. You're kind of looking at, is it a big restaurant company? Is it a single mom and pop place? Do they have any cash flow? Do they have any reserves? Do they have any, like, everybody is in a unique situation. And the ones that are reaching out that I've been able to speak with and help and work with, the ones that are at their kind of at their wits end, they have gone into, well, let's do groceries, let's do curbside, let's do dinner in people's homes. You see the internet is saturated with chefs that are, certainly doing online classes and online cooking at home. And so I think everybody is so different. Then there's big companies that are kind of in an okay spot, kind of, I don't know if or not, but scooping have gone out of business. They couldn't hold on. They've gone out of business, and they have a turnkey restaurant sitting there, with a full wine cellar ready to go. Folks that are investors or that have money, or developers that are able to go in and either partner with those guys, or they absorb it. The strong is surviving, unfortunately, in some way. But how do we help the ones that are the weak, right? How do we help the ones that are really great at what they do and didn't see this coming, don't deserve this? Not that anybody deserves this. But how do we help those? How do we help the ones that can't help themselves, right? And sometimes it's just liquidate. Sometimes it's just sell it and circle your wagons and wait and get a job and, go back to doing whatever you were doing, or go into another field of cuisine, whether it's restaurant people going into the grocery stores, places like Wegmans and Mariano's and Jewel's and all these mega grocery stores that are thriving, right? I had some friends that one guy was an incredible butcher, and he got an incredible opportunity to go be a butcher at a grocery store chain, large grocery store chain in Florida. And for him to close everything down, come to a place of peace that this moment in time is over, right. Sold everything, relocated, went into a whole different sector of the food business, and is doing great. But he has a 3-year-old and 6-year-old that he's got to be responsible for. So he did what he had to do, So I think some of it is you have to do what you have to do for your family, and take care of that,
Yeah, that's so true. And, and it kind of ties right into like leadership, and, leadership is so critical right now in restaurants. What do you think is the number one trait that a leader needs today?
Compassion. I think, I think that compassion goes a long way. And I think that balance of making those hard decisions, so you got to make the hard decisions, right? But I think that I think we're in a different period of time where leaders have to do what's best to drive their companies, and but I think that the ones that are taking care of their staff the best that they can, and that are showing some compassion, that's going to come back to them sevenfold. There is no doubt in my mind. The ones that are kind of throwing everybody to the curb,
right,
with maybe no compassion, and it's every man for themselves. I think you may have had some really great people that you could have helped and you didn't. And I think that loyalty and that throwing to the curb mentality is not going to suit you well later.
Right. Yeah, karma.
For sure.
I think karma's a sister. She has sisters.
Yeah, right. I mean, and can I throw that back at you? I mean, what you do an amazing job with this show and with your writing and your blogs, and what do you think that is right now? I mean, if you had to throw that out into this conversation, because I'd love to hear that from you.
Yeah, I think having, being positive, Being optimistic is a huge thing. I would say leaders lead the vision. So you have to be able to navigate and see past what's going on right now. And you're a man of faith. Have faith that things down the road are going to come together. You might not see all the dots right now, but having faith and belief that there will be better times. We will get through this.
Yes, this too will pass.
This
Correct.
too shall pass. I'm a big believer in faith, and whatever people's religious beliefs are, that's their thing. But I'm also a big believer in that. If I can maintain my faith and have certainty that things are going to get better, I think that's the thing leaders need right now. It's just it's so easy. Especially if you look at the news. It's so easy to get drowned in the doom and gloom and all the negativity. And I know it's a big political year, and it's so easy to get caught up in all that stuff. And I had to finally just stop watching all that stuff because it was just so bad.
And I think transparency is pretty key. I think,
big.
I think the folks that have been honest with their staff from the get-go and that communication, again, I've seen people leaders disappear. Just disappear, not communicate with their staff, not communicate with their landlords, and out of fear, go hide, or just out of confusion, they don't know what to say to them. So they choose to say nothing or to lead them on or not be transparent. I think that that's also the worst thing to do. I think that it shows compassion and humanity to say, I don't know what we're going to do. Yeah. Things are really, screwed up, and I need some time to figure it out. And, I think that's also honesty is the best policy sometimes in these situations as a leader,
Definitely. Yeah. I have a saying is that to take no action is an action. It's just not smart action. And leadership, a lot of people I think have a misconception about leadership, thinking that a leader has to have all the answers, and you don't.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. I think they have to be willing to listen, and they have to be willing to navigate and have compassion. But also, I think you're right. If they have to reformulate their vision, I love being part of teams. And I think the greatest thing about being a part of the team is you don't feel alone. And, ask people, what do you think? What are some of our options? People that are much smarter than I around the table, and give us some direction, Yeah. I think that's very cool.
Yeah, I think Steve Jobs had a great quote. He says, we don't hire smart people to tell them what to do. We hire smart people so they can tell us what to do.
That's right. That's right.
Makes sense. Yeah.
It sure does.
I'm a big believer in self-care. What do you do for self-care? And a lot of people, and let me kind of clarify, a lot of people think, when I say self-care, I mean go to the gym for 2 hours. No, self-care is taking care of yourself, whatever it is.
Yeah, it's interesting. I pondered that for a day or two, and I've been very good since this whole thing has started to think of all the self-care things that I didn't do because I'm a workaholic and a maniac when it comes to that. And I do work out. I do go to the gym. I love to swim, but I have horrible arthritis, being in kitchens my whole life and having a hip replacement 6 years ago, or a rotator cuff. And so I battle. But I've always not drank crazy, the last 10 years after I've cleaned my life up and, eat well and take care of my diet and all of that. And, but I've always put off things like, I need to have a knee replacement surgery. And, it's like, when am I going to have 8 weeks to recover from something like that? Right. So, jokingly enough, the two things that I've done is I've read all the stuff that I've never gotten to read over the last 8 years. I've planned my knee replacement surgery, and I've spent time with family. So the three things that I have not had the chance to do have, and again, everybody has their own world of faith. For me, God has stopped my whole world for almost a year, 8 months, and said, okay, here are the things, get what you have to get done, because once this ramps up again,
we're going.
you're going to be busier than ever. So take care of what you got to take care of.
Mm-hmm. I always say there's like little messages from above, and it's our job to listen. It's like.
But you're right. You said something before. You have to stop the noise.
Yeah, stop the noise.
To hear it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And shut off the news for a couple days, right? Don't read, everything on the internet for a minute, and give yourself a chance. I think sometimes we hate quiet. I think we can't stand quiet. And whether you have to have the TV on in the background or you have to have music on all the time or whatever it is, like you try to take that minute of can you hear if God is speaking to you? Are you able to hear it? Because there's so much noise, right?
That's so true. So what is the best meal you ever had? And I'm going to start off with this one because this is honest to God truth. When people ask me what's the best meal, the best dining experience you've ever had in your life, I always tell them the best experience I ever had in my life. I went to a restaurant downtown Chicago called True. And I tell everyone, and I've told everyone this for years, the best dining experience I ever had in my whole life has always been True.
Thank you.
It's an amazing experience. Just the service was so precise. The food was so precise. Everything was so meticulous. I mean, I tell everyone, and then when people say, well, how do I get my restaurant to a better level? How do I get my restaurant to a higher level? I always ask them, what's the best dining experience you've ever had? Because I kind of describe it like driving a high performance car. If you've never experienced food and service at a super high level, it's hard to understand what that is.
Yeah. I've been very blessed to have an incredible team around me all the time. People that are like-minded thinkers, right? And you have to trust, just like a sports team.
Yep.
Michael Jordan used to have to trust Scottie Pippen was going to be there to throw the ball, even though he wasn't looking at him, and he was going to catch it. And I've been able to travel a ton my whole life and learn because I didn't have the traditional classroom setting or traditional educational setting. My thing has always been hands-on and going and seeing it and tasting it and touching it and feeling it. So I always used to judge restaurants that were inspiring or my best meal until the next best meal. That's how depressed I was when I left the restaurant. Like walking out of Pierre Gagnère in Saint Etienne in 95, I was probably as depressed as I could be because I was like, fuck, I could never be that good. It's just, he's so good. It's so good. And then going to Ducasse or going to Robuchon or going back and, whatever those great meals are, I think they're always evolving.
Right.
I don't think there's this epitome of it. I think there's a compilation of it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what made True so special is there was this compilation of every detail and never going in, there's always the great saying, and I'm sure you've heard it, and we would say it all the time at our pre-shifts. If you can just do one thing better today that you didn't do yesterday, and you have, 50 people in a room, that's 50 things. You only have to do one. If everybody can just do one thing better,
boom,
we can talk about it, then we have 50 things every day that we're doing better. And you're never there, right? So every time I would travel and I had this amazing notebook and I'd sketch and I'd draw and I'd take, wasn't able to take pictures so much in the early days. I was all by hand, but now it's taking pictures of everything and going home and watching the film and what can I do and how can I do it? There's not one. That's the answer. There's a dinner at David Boulet's, there's a dinner at Pierre Gagnère's, there's a dinner at Alain Ducasse's, there's 2 dinners at Alain Chappelle's, there's a dinner at Anton Mosselman's. I mean, you can go on, and it's the compilation of that greatness that, and I can't forget my grandmother or my mother. So, where it all kind of began. Mm-hmm. Nobody can make an Italian cookie like my grandmother, right? Nobody can make right. I know I'm not, giving you the exact profile answer, but it certainly is.
So, eating is about memory.
Yeah,
I
100%.
would say some of the times when I look back in my life, some of the best meals actually, I mean, and I can look at food as from a aesthetic point as far as quality and service, like an elevated, like an experience, like a true. But then I think about some of my best meals I've ever had was my grandma.
Yeah.
Going out in the garden with her and harvesting fresh vegetables and going inside and cooking them up fresh. I mean,
Yeah.
those are some of the things I remember the most about my childhood.
I wish I was. I don't know how to say this. I'm going to just try to say it the best I can. I wish I was more. It's like, I don't know. It's like guys that write great music.
Mm-hmm.
Wish I was more in the moment at certain times. Like when young cooks and people ask me, what would you tell your younger self, or any of those kind of questions. I always say, sometimes you're doing your best work in your life and you don't even know. So many other things flying, whether you have 3 kids at home and you're trying to work your 18-hour shift, and you're working 6 days a week, and 2 days turn into 2 years, turn into 8 years, and life is flying by. But when it's all over and you're looking back and going, man, this was a great team, and this was a great menu, and this was a great time in my life.
Right.
Was I miserable at that time? Was I appreciative? Was I listening? Was there too much noise? And most times, it's sad to say, but there was too much noise, and I never appreciated it. And it was a struggle. I mean, the true years for me were a bitch. I mean, they were hardcore, tough times, as far as personally and physically and, mentally staying in the game every day. It was a tough journey. I wasn't able to enjoy it. And that's a sad thing to say. I wish I had that opportunity to redo that album and enjoy that recording session a little bit more.
So then people say, like, True is like awesome. I said, what the thing about True that was really like took it over the top is, as I'm leaving True, I open the door and who walks in but Sammy Hagar? Okay, that's cool. I'm like, I'm a huge Sammy Hagar fan. I'm like, oh my gosh, Sammy Hagar walking in as I'm leaving.
Yeah, he was there a bunch of times. I mean, it was definitely a celebrity haunt. We took care of a lot of good celebrities there that were into food, that were generally, kind and compassionate. And Sammy's one of the kindest guys on the planet, and is a family guy, and certainly has always been a great supporter for sure.
I'm gonna throw you a curveball question. If you could cook for anybody, living or dead, who would you cook if you want?
It'd be my mom, because my mom never got to see. I mean, I know she sees, but my mom never got to see any of my success. My mom died right as I was opening up Trio.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. So she got to meet my son when he was like 3, and that was the time we were opening like Trio. But she never saw any of my books. I mean, I've written 8 books. She never got to see any of my restaurants. I never got to really go back and show her like what the journey, how the journey ended, right? So that would be the one, I think, for me.
Yeah, for me, my grandmother, because she really introduced me to food. That kind of whole farm to table. I mean, that's how I lived back then. Farm to table was like you go out in your garden and get it, and then you cook it.
That's right.
So who are some of your mentors?
Rich Melman, for sure. In so many ways. I think Pierre Gagnère, for sure, because he had one of the largest impacts. Alfred Portali, for sure, because he was one of the first. John Foles, absolutely. I mean, just when I went to New Orleans, it's like anything. When you know a certain cuisine, whether it's Italian, when you know something, and then you're able to be plucked out of that environment. It's like if somebody were to pluck me out of my world and throw me in China.
Right.
You had to learn the language. You had to learn the basics. You had to learn all the food. That's how it was for me going to New Orleans, because New Orleans is just not New Orleans. New Orleans is the 7 nations of cuisine.
Right.
And to really study what that is, and to have a master teacher teach it to you, like a John Folse. I mean, it's like a young kid getting plucked in and getting thrown into Paul Bocuse's kitchen and having Paul Bocuse mentor you on the history of France and the history of each dish and what this dish is and where it came from and how it became. It was exciting. I mean, it was we lived in a plantation home for a year while we were working on the concept of revolution, learning the seven nations, because even as a chef, I'd never dug that deep. I'd never dug that deep in the ability to learn that cuisine, not like that. To where John would throw me in his truck and drive me to the swamps of Louisiana. And you go to South Louisiana and, you watch swamp people on television, but to go visit them and to truck through the swamps of Louisiana and to go, frogging and alligator hunting and fishing and, going out on the Gulf. And I'm a city kid. I never had a chance to, the only guns that were shot around me were in the inner city. Right. So, I mean, it was a whole new, it was being on another planet for me. And that's what re-sparked my life. Coming out of, my steakhouses and my Italian restaurants and all of the body of work that I did, I was burnt. I mean, I was just tired. And to take that kind of journey revitalized my whole life at that point, which gave me another 10 years of excitement. Right. Now I'm looking for the next 10.
There you go.
What's the next 10, right?
That's gonna be awesome. So right now, how do you think restaurants should shift their menus?
Well, I think they should be them. You're an Italian restaurant and all of a sudden you want to do Chinese to go, maybe not such a good idea. I think you could do, your great Italian and kind of figure out, know your clientele, know what you can do to engage them more. I don't know. I don't know if it's a menu shift versus maybe a menu accommodation. Maybe slim it down. Obviously, you're slimming your staff down. You're trying to slim all your overhead down to survive at the end of the day. So, I'm a big believer of trying to also bring it to your clients. There's a lot of clients that still have a lot of cash that would love for you to go into their home and cook for them or do their Christmas party but they just maybe can't make it to your restaurant. So either start going to them. I've had lots of people ask me to do dinner parties online, right? Where, I would either go there and ship all the food there and do it there, or I would, or they would cook along. I mean, all this innovation that's happening online, I think it's almost I think it's invaluable because we would have never have thought of it or done it.
Exactly.
Restaurants that never have done to go now that are doing to go, especially the high-end restaurants, kudos to them. Kudos to guys like, Grant at Alinea, and watching them reinvent this wonderful cuisine so people can either do it at home or they can come and pick it up and finish it at home. I'm inspired by that. I was incredibly inspired by that when they, those folks were doing that. And guys like Curtis Duffy that, had to open up in the middle of this pandemic.
I know, whatever. I mean, that's crazy.
I mean, and that had so much in the center of the table, all the chips in the center of the table. But talk about a man of faith, and talk about a man of focus, and talk about a man of, being persistent. That's inspiring. There is no room for failure. There is no looking back. It's just forward. And whatever forward is for you, move forward.
You just gave me the title for our episode. I'm going to call it Faith, Focus, and Forward.
There you go. There you go.
3 keywords I got from you. Awesome. So what's your favorite social media platform?
I don't have one. I mean, I go on Instagram, and, I certainly am on Facebook and all this stuff, but, I don't, I post carefully.
Right.
I post intentionally. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I communicate intentionally. Um, I share my passion with people that have the same passion, which is music and food and my faith.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I'm not. It's funny because I've never been a big even though I've done a ton of television, I've never like it wasn't like, man, I want a television show, or man, I'm gonna create a YouTube channel. And there's so many people that are so good at it. Again, it's that whole philosophy of, when you walk out of a restaurant, how depressed am I of how good it is? And analyze it to the point of, if I can do it as good as that, I'm gonna go do it, right? Um, I just, it doesn't speak to me. I guess that's the word. Having an online show, it's not speaking to me enough to go do it, to put all my heart into it, to go do it. But, doing Iron Chef or Top Chef Masters or the Oprah Show or, the list of television, those were great. Those were moments in time.
Right.
But if I was going to do any kind of social media platform, I'd have to really think about it, and I love YouTube because I can go see so much old stuff. I can go Google a Rush show from the 2112 tour and see it, or I could Google a cooking demonstration from Julia Child or James Beard and go look at it. So that's inspiring, I guess. So again, I'm sorry, I'm not hitting your questions exactly.
You're hitting them. You're hitting them. You're hitting them. So, okay, so another curveball. If you had to see any band alive, or that, like not together anymore, what band, if you could bring them back for one show, who would you want to see?
Yeah. So again, other than cooking my whole life, the only other thing I've done from a hobby standpoint is live music. My first show that I took my kids to go see was the Led Zeppelin reunion concert in London. Like that's how I wanted to start that's how I wanted to start their musical journey of live shows, right? But the only person that the only group I haven't had a chance to see were the Beatles.
Right.
And I'm pretty content. I'm pretty spoiled. A lot of shows, a lot of backstage shows, a lot of iconic festivals. It's always been a priority and it's always been a passion. But the Beatles got away. I mean, I would have loved to have seen that at some point in time, I think, but I got to capture mostly everybody else I wanted to see at least once, if not 3 or 4 times. Yeah. But I'm a metal guy. So a lot of that, from Metallica to Megadeth to, Queensryche to, grew up in the 80s. So certainly, all the 80s, but the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, rock and roll metal, that speaks to me. My favorite band is Rush. So I think I've seen Rush, I think it was 19 times before Perk died.
Wow.
A lot of Rush shows. My kids have seen a lot of Rush shows. I've dragged them all, 3 boys, to a lot of Rush shows.
My first rock concert was Van Halen when David Lee Roth was the lead singer.
Yeah.
And then I always make the joke to people. I said, I saw Def Leppard on the Pyromania tour when the drummer had both arms.
And I joke with people about that Van Halen tour. I always say, I saw Van Halen open for Black Sabbath. They were just an opening act.
Yeah, that's crazy, huh? Now, looking back through in some of the other restaurants you have, like, Revolution down in New Orleans, culture. I really think culture is a huge influence on a restaurant success. What would you say is the key to creating culture?
Again, I think you got to be able to show people your passion. You got to be able to, I have a great saying, any restaurant or kitchen that I go into, I always imagine a line, and I'm the only one standing on this side of the fence, and everybody else is on this side of the fence. And my job is to pull each one over to my side of the fence one at a time. And that could be the garmager, girl who I'm going to go mentor and talk to and open their world up to amuse bouche and all of those things and try to inspire them, but also know the name of their dog and their kid and, engage them in that fashion. Or the runner who I'm trying to, articulate how important it is to, get this food to this table while it's hot and like all these things. And once I feel I've won everyone over, whoever's left on the other side of the fence usually isn't going to make the team.
Right.
Because I wasn't able to, and I take responsibility. I'm not able to inspire them.
Mm-hmm.
And I start to find out, what are they interested in? Like, what do you do when you're not here? And some will say, well, I'm a singer. And I'm like, well, why don't you go sing? Like, why are you here? Like, how can we help you get into theater? Or how can we help you, be a veterinarian? And, they need a job and, all these things. But I think you have to show your true colors to some folks and let them hear your voice.
Yes.
In their box, and let them know that, this is your life. This is everything to you. And you try to do it with as much integrity and care and kindness. Always been the challenge. If that makes it work,
Definitely. When you mention the word inspire, I'm a big, I like to study words. When we look at the word inspire, it actually comes from, inspiros, which means in spirit.
That's right.
Yeah. So
exactly.
Yeah. So you got to find. I always say, culture is about finding what inspires people.
Yeah.
That's the leader's job. Help kind of pull that out of them. Show
That's
them
right.
show them what inspires you, but then also find what they can connect to inside them and pull that out of them.
And I've had believe it or not, I've had amazing staff through my journey that they weren't foodies. They weren't passionate about certain things that they were doing, but they were great at it because their work ethic was so superior.
Yeah.
And I couldn't imagine somebody that, I had somebody that was a horse trainer.
Right.
And she loved horses. She rode them, she trained them, she jumped them, and she was through in and through out, loved horses. But her job is she was a captain, she was a waiter.
Right.
And she knew every single dish, every single ingredient, every single wine. Like, that was her work ethic, though. If you were to ask her, like, hey, you want to go and jump on a plane and I'll take you to Ducasse? Nah, I'm good. It's like it was a very interesting line for me, because I would have never have guessed that about her, because she was so good at her job. Yeah. But then she kind of threw it back at me and she said, have you ever ridden a horse? And I said, no. Would you like to? I said, sure. And she brought me out and she showed me her world, how to feed a horse, how to pet a horse, what a saddle is, like all these things about a horse, right? But I never looked at that ever again the same way, because the way I felt about service and food, she felt about horses and riding. But she reached out and made the connection. She reached out and said, instead of you taking me to Ducasse, why don't I take you to the horse stables and show you how to shovel shit, right? It was awesome. It was an amazing teaching moment for Rick.
That's awesome. That's really cool. No, and that's a great thing too about leadership too. It's like, don't box yourself into your world. Sometimes, expand your horizons and look how other people see the world too.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's hard sometimes. It's hard to remind yourself of that, right?
Yeah. I think being a leader sometimes is being humble to the point where you're willing to listen and look.
Agreed.
Yeah, definitely. So what's one thing that you suggest that restaurants do right now to kind of get ready for this new economy?
Well, I think that they should do everything that they can to make sure that everybody is safe and comfortable, and retool all of that. But I think it's also it's a blessed time for them to keep saying to themselves, this is going to pass and
Right.
we're going to rock again soon. And what should we be doing to get back to capacity? And again, if it's funds or if it's not funds, but it's still things like, let's rezone the coolers, let's redo the dry store room, let's clean everything top to bottom. Let's P-touch everything. Let's look at new uniforms if there's budget. Let's continue to make it better every day. Four walls, as if we were going to do 500 covers tonight, right? How do we keep ourselves in the future? Let's get ready for the floodgates to open, and knowing we're not going to have time to do any of this once the floodgates open again. Let's use this time wisely, right? You can't afford to do that. It's still about grind, and it's still about rolling up your sleeves and being able to either do it yourself, or finding ways to cross train. A lot of the people I'm talking to right now, a lot of their staff has not been cross trained, which was not shocking to me, but it was certainly a window that opened to say, look, guys, there's that always great saying, well, that's not my job. Well, it is your job. It's everybody's job. But I mean, deeper than that, to say, hey, my Garde guy, he can run 2 days a week. My runner, he can bartend 2 days a week. Whatever that is, that cross training moment. So then when the floodgates do open and you now have this incredibly cross trained staff, because you had these slow nights or these really, controllable nights, that you can have that kind of training and movement and interaction with each other. Has everybody tasted every dish on the menu? And do they really know it? Go back to testing, go back to tasting, go back to systems, go back to organization and wine seminars and teaching, and bring in one of your fishmongers and go do all the things that you're not able to do sometimes when you're just full tilt boogie on education, right? And I think you have to stir that up as a leader. You have to be able to continue to inspire your team by all of those things. Take them to a farm. Take them pumpkin picking in a few weeks in a pumpkin patch. Whatever it is for the connection to happen, and for everybody to do that one thing better today that they didn't do yesterday. Inspiration.
Very cool. No, that's awesome. And Restaurant Revolution's getting ready to reopen again, aren't you?
Like I said, we were going to reopen. We were supposed to reopen on tomorrow, on the 10th.
Okay.
But because of the hurricane 2 weeks ago, they postponed it another month. So now we're October the 10th.
October 10th.
Another month away now.
What are some things you're going to be doing different there?
Well, we're in a hotel and we're in the French Quarter. So it's like being at ground zero times two. It's like being in Times Square, right? There's only so many things I can do because it's such a tourist town.
Right.
Until there is a true vaccine, until the conventions are back, until the tourism's back, until people are getting on a plane, the first 6 weeks of this virus, to see them cancel Jazz Fest, French Quarter Fest, all the festivals that drives New Orleans. They're talking about canceling Mardi Gras this year, or a different version of Mardi Gras this year. I mean, everybody's kind of waiting to see what happens. So, like I said, I don't have this crystal ball. What we're going to do within the four walls is certainly, trim it down.
Right.
Probably not reopen for lunch. Probably we do room service for the hotel anyways. So, maybe do Thursday through Sunday. I think we're going to have to let the terroir speak to us. I think we're going to let the people speak to us and see how things evolve. But we're going to open up one service at a time and see what happens,
Now I know, like, for chefs this is hard to do, but if you got to pick one dish on your menu at Revolution, what would you say is your favorite dish?
It would have to be John's Death by Gumbo. If you all ever come to New Orleans, make sure you have Chef Folst's Death by Gumbo for sure. Because because it really speaks to not only the 7 nations of Louisiana, but it speaks to this why revolution happened, trying to take old, you can't mess with tradition. So you have to take all these iconic dishes and how to make them a little bit more contemporary to today without losing 1 inch of tradition. So that's a dish that I think really speaks to that.
Very cool.
I'll tell you what it is. I'll make you come and have it.
All right, I'll definitely come down and have it. Yeah,
There you go.
I love gumbo. I have a couple clients in Louisiana, in the Baton Rouge area,
Yeah.
and I mean, every time I go, I put on like 5 pounds. It's like gumbo and hush puppies. I'm just like, I can't help myself.
Yeah, a lot of fat on some fat, right? I mean,
Gumbo and hush puppies get me every time. Oh man, they get me. So how do you deal with stress?
prayer.
Mhm.
Fear and faith are those two things that are those polar opposites, and I equate, I do equate stress with fear sometimes, and
Yeah.
but I love my Bible studies. I love my church family. I certainly love to be with my family, my kids and stuff. But I mean, when stress gets so peaked out, there's a walk away moment. I call them my walk-in meetings, and I walk in the walk-in and close the door and have my moment and usually come back out and breathe. But in the old days, it was okay to like go smash some plates and be a maniac, and that's how you were taking the stress out. But those days are over, for multiple reasons, right?
Walk-in has always been great therapy.
Always, the walk-in therapy is certainly the key.
Yeah.
Now, when you start to arrange vegetables and make sure all the peppers are lined up, and look, there's an orange in the lemon container, and cleaning the walk-in is the best therapy in the world, right?
Oh yeah, I love going in the walk-in. You and I have similar backgrounds in the sense that you and I both did an apprenticeship program. So
yeah, it meant everything to me that somebody who didn't know me from Adam was kind enough to say, yes, I will let you in my house. I will let you in my kitchen. And whether you speak the language or not, your recommendations of your character is going to allow you the trust to come into my kitchen and behave properly, have a high work ethic, ask the right questions, listen when you're not supposed to talk, all those things, right?
Awesome. So I always say, when we look at the Chinese word crisis, it's danger and opportunity. We have two characters. And I know COVID-19, I said there's definitely danger, but there's also opportunity. What do you see as some opportunities right now for restaurants?
Yeah, again, I go back to budget. I mean, I go back to cash flow and things like that. I think there's incredible opportunities. I think there's some amazing real estate out there that is available. I think there's some amazing partnerships with chefs that are suffering that is available. I think that if you can find, there's plenty of turnkey restaurants that you don't have to spend a fortune on. There's plenty of developers. I mean, my God, there's still so much building going on in Chicago. Yes, it has slowed down and it's retooled itself in some ways, but again, I go back to look at the cranes in the sky still in Chicago. Those, they're not tearing those down yet, so that's a good sign. But I think there still has to be this time lapse of vaccination and safety, and but there is preparation in leading up to that. So when that does happen and they turn the faucet on, you are prepared or you are ready to go. I've had a number of phone calls of folks that, our deal in New Orleans is a licensing deal, a licensing management deal. So I don't own a chair or a table. The Royal Sonesta owns everything. So they're licensing our concept and our recipes and our brand and our name, and but all the employees, report to their HR and their accounting and all of that. So there's a freedom in that in some ways. So there's been a lot of people reaching out that are hotel folks and restaurant groups that are looking to partner up with even guys like me to do opportunities. And because it's time for the next generation. I'm not I'm probably not going to be working the fish station 5 nights a week if I have an opportunity to go do another restaurant. But I certainly will build and teach and mentor a team and lead that team to the Super Bowl. I always joke, I can get you to the Super Bowl, guys, but you're going to have to win it. You're going to have to be on that field playing those positions, and I certainly can coach and participate. But there's going to be many of plays that you're going to be running on your own, and you're going to have to make those decisions. If you want to win the business, I think what I have to give at this point is lots of teaching and mentorship, but I still have such a creative mind and juice that it's collaboration. I want to be able to collaborate with the next generation, if you will, and find the next, group of chefs that are right at the cusp of not being discouraged and getting ready to do, to break out. And because I'm not somebody that I don't see myself ever retiring, because I don't play golf and I don't, I don't do those kind of things. Not that there's anything wrong with those kind of things, but that's not what drives me to get out of bed every day.
Right.
I would rather go into a kitchen than go on the golf course to get me, to the end of my road,
Exactly. Now, you have a lot of books behind you. So name one book, an audio book, or a podcast that you recommend.
I'm a big Tony Dungy fan. I love Uncommon. That's an inspirational book for me. I listen to a lot of Gary Vee and Tony Robbins, but I listen to a lot of spiritual stuff. I listen to my pastor Gregory Dickow of Life Changers Church, and who has lots of series. And so I listen to a lot of that. As far as, cookbooks go, I'm a cookbook fanatic. I mean, I have 2,000 cookbooks in this arena behind. But it's a think tank, for me. It's my library. It's where I write. It's where I think. It's where I can create. And I'm still discovering new books, like, the Whole Fish Cookbook, that has come out, which I'm fascinated by. The new St. John's Cookbook, the new, so there's always new books coming out. So I think it's just, being inspired to stay relevant and, not have my wife yell at me too much for buying so many cookbooks all the time, and trying to keep that driving. But yeah,
my thing for books, I say it's a healthy addiction.
It is. It's certainly
to be spending in books. I think are always a great. Yeah, I'm like you. I have a huge cookbook collection. I have a huge business library.
Yeah. Same. Yeah. And now now I'm getting into I don't know if it's a microculture, but like this last 8 months, okay, there's 2 things that I focused on that I never got a chance to get deep with, and that's barbecue and pizza, right? Ooh. I know them, I've done them, but to do a study where I, got my pizzaioli certificate, I went to North American Pizza School, and Leo Spizzari, who was my pizza instructor, had the opportunity to be a part of his master class, and then come home and really spend time. And that's somebody, that would be perfect to be on this show. And go look up Leo Spizzari, the North American Pizza Academy.
Seen you're documenting it on Facebook when you're.
Yeah, so inspired, and so and then that broke me into, sourdough cultures and doing all that at home and, keeping myself busy. And then barbecue. So I have a really good friend that has a restaurant called Chicago Culinary Kitchen, and Greg Garbo and Christina Garbo are pit masters in Chicago, and they're incredible barbecue, inspiring folks. So starting to read everything that Greg was starting to recommend, and going and all hours of the night, and studying, and mentoring me in barbecue, and then trying to make it at home, and buying stuff for the house, and doing smokers and green eggs and all these things at home that I never had the time for. I was always in the restaurant. I would be up, 5. I'd be out the door by 6. I wouldn't be home until 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night. So all those, those two things that I really wanted to have the opportunity to pause my life and study them. I'm inspired. Like, I want to open up a pizzeria so bad now. Like, it's like, well, now it's like a pizzeria barbecue, maybe, so I'm having fun with the time, and I'm having fun with, getting energized again and learning again and being a student. When you're a teacher for so long, sometimes you just want to be a student, sometimes you don't want to lead today. Sometimes you want to learn, and you just want to kind of listen and have quiet time where you're watching a master, at what they do, whether it's pizza or barbecue or Chinese or whatever, making dumplings, and you're just in awe of their craft because they've studied it their whole life, and you want it to rub off on you. It took me weeks and weeks and weeks for Leo to say, "That's a damn good looking pizza." I mean, it was humbling. It was humbling for a guy to just throw your shit away all the time. It's like, this, look at this, this is wrong, this is wrong. It was awesome.
Pizza might be your time, because the pizza segment's up huge. This might be that calling from above saying it's time for a pizza place.
I'm thinking.
I'm telling you, I think a pizza place would be great. Yeah.
And same thing with fire. Like, in refined cooking, I didn't have a chance to cook on open fire, right? Like all these, woodwork grills now, and all the wood ovens, and all the stuff that was inspiring. So that's another, door of, when I was doing this thing out in California, going to Adam Perry Lang's restaurant, or going to some master open fire guys that really know how to dance with the fire, they call it, right? How to really work with fire. I think that's fascinating as well. I love it. So I'm trying to motivate myself during this time. You're asking me how other people should motivate themselves. You're going to have to find what kind of tickles you, what drives your mind to go, look. People would say, well, Rick Tramonto, you've done all this stuff, blah, blah, blah. But there's still things that are like, energizing for me, that it's like, I've never done that before. I've never done it that deep before. Let's dive in and let's really study it. I love it. I'm having fun. I mean, in some ways, I'm having some of the best time in a long time, because I have the time, which is a commodity.
Mm-hmm. No, that's the truth. I mean, yeah, I think the minute you kind of say, all right, I've done what I can, then you stop growing, you start dying.
Yeah, I keep teasing you about it. It's the depression joke. It's that depression level of like, and what I mean by depressed, I mean like, inspired or in awe some ways, but knowing that somebody like pastry, I'm going to use pastry as an example. I've been very blessed to have a pastry chef with me for a long time, who's a master pastry chef. So, sometimes you neglect that area, and you're like, well, I got a pastry chef and they study their whole life, chocolates and breads, and you know it proficiently. You have to go in and do it. You can kind of fake it till you make it. But for people that do pastry, I have the greatest respect for pastry chefs in the world, because it's a focused segment. Repetition, and it's brutal if you're great at it, and they make it look so easy all the time. So, I think that there's a lot to be said about those kinds of segments to dive into,
There was like a little cake. Gail used to do it true, and it was a French one. It had like a special mold for it.
Cannelé.
Was that it?
The little cannelés?
Yeah, those things. Oh my
Crazy
God.
good, right? Yeah.
Those
Those kind of things, like, you could spend months perfecting that and getting the right mold, and having somebody like Gail teach you that over and over and over, and then go home and try to master it, and have her throw them all away and say they're not good enough, do them again, like those kind of things. So when you find those things in your career, now this is advice, all of you that are listening, that are looking for that's the ticket. Like, go find your weakest link, go find some of your weak points. Barbecue was my weak point, there's no doubt. Pizza wasn't my weak point, but nothing like my new pizza game, right? Pastry was my weak point, but as you start to find some of your weak links, be inspired by that and go challenge yourself on it.
Yeah, I'm always in awe of pastry chefs. I mean, when I used to work with Wolfgang Puck for 5 years, and Sherry Yard I was just like,
incredible. Sherry's an incredible talent.
Always make friends with the pastry chefs.
Always, right? Yeah. Always. And now for me, I
you know what I mean?
Always, 100%. Yeah.
So what's one quote you live by?
Yeah, treat people the way you want to be treated. I think that kind of solves a lot of issues. And as I look out into the world today, if some folks can just kind of rekindle that thought, would you really want to be treated that way? Is that really how you want people to treat you? I mean, just take a breath and just respect and treat others the way that you want to be treated. And the rest of my stuff is, pretty scriptural stuff. Is I can do all things through Christ, and those are some things that are either tattooed on my body or that I live by personally. Right. But yeah, I think that to distill it down for today's time. And even our government, if they could just treat people the way they would want to be treated, I think changer,
Tell you that, yeah. Let's even go there. That's another full hour discussion.
Yeah, it is for sure.
So how can people contact you?
Oh, I'm easy. I'm easy to find. I'm at TramontoCuisine.com. I'm at Chef Rick Tramonto at Chef Tramonto at AOL. I have a website. I have social media everywhere. So I'm pretty easy to track down. If somebody needs something and I can help them, would be happy to have a conversation with them.
Yeah. That's awesome. I want to say, thanks, Rick, so much for being on the show today. I mean, incredible value, incredible things for people, especially now. I mean, like you said, this is, troubling times. And everyone needs a little positive encouragement and a little, just something to kind of help them find whatever's inside them to kind of pull through this. So
yeah, I think I want to just throw that back to you. You're always very positive, and I've seen a lot of your stuff now, and I appreciate you, and I appreciate the value that you bring, because again, there are a lot of people that are just a little lost. They just need some guidance, or they need, like you said, they need a hug. They just need some encouragement to be able to pick up. I mean, there's been so many families that I've talked to over the last 6 months, especially in Chicago, that they've lost everything, right? And you have to step back and go, man, I start looking at them inside, even in California, all the families that lost from the fires, or people in Louisiana from the hurricanes, and you're like, how are they able to continue? People that lost their family restaurant from 3 generations I just talked to last week. And, they said, if this is meant to be, they will continue, and it'll resurface itself. But they were just grateful that somebody went down there to this particular place and helped them clean up and brought
Yeah.
them lunch and gave them a hug, and just it was really, it meant a lot. You'd be surprised what just a little goes a long way. So I
Exactly.
appreciate you for doing the show and for the stuff that you're doing during this time as well.
Well, thank you, Chef. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again for being on the show.
Yeah,
And
man. Stay in
if
touch.
anybody has to get a hold of Chef Tramonto, TramontoCuisine.com, Chef Tramonto at AOL.com. Lots of ways to get a hold of the man. He is definitely someone, if you want to reach out to, please contact him. He's a great, valuable asset. So reach out to him.
Thank you, sir. You stay well, and we'll see you for that Death by Gumbo soon, huh?
Come down for it. You watch.